All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. After nearly 8 underwhelming years as the head football coach at Syracuse, Dino Babers got his walking papers today. In his time at Syracuse, Babers' record was 41-55, while he was just 20-45 in the ACC. Now, under Babers, Syracuse only had two winning seasons, which included them going 10-3 in 2018. Babers brought some enthusiasm with him to Central New York from Bowling Green, which was his previous coaching stop. But at Syracuse, it simply didn't translate to wins. It's not easy to win at Syracuse, and the record shows. This program has not been consistent at winning in more than 20 years. I said it when it happened, and I'm going to continue to say it. The move from the Big East to the ACC has not helped Syracuse, and you could make that case for several other schools that went south, if you will. You look at Boston College. Boston College's football and basketball programs have not been the same since going to the ACC. Virginia Tech, which started off strong in the ACC football wise, they have really tapered off. Miami was a national power before making the move from the Big East to the ACC. All of these schools chased money, and you see what it's gotten them. I mean, even with Pitt, I know that Pitt was able to win the ACC a couple of years ago, but I mean, overall, Pitt football is not what it once was. But getting back to Syracuse, again, they chased a paycheck, and this is what they got. This is what they wanted. They wanted more money. Well, you know what? You got to deal with the downside of it. And I mean, honestly, you think back to Syracuse's heyday, first of all, as an independent, and then during their time in the Big East, Syracuse was able to consistently get the kids from the Northeast to stay home. And I'm talking about the New York State kids. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's football talent in New York State. It might, it's not going to be on the same level of a Florida, Texas, or California, but nonetheless, there is football talent there. Syracuse was able to get those kids. They were able to get the kids from the New England region. They were able to get the kids, some of the kids at least, from New Jersey and Pennsylvania. But they haven't been able to consistently get those kids since they made the move to the ACC. And then on top of that, it's been a long time since Syracuse has had themselves a dynamic quarterback. You can make the case that they really haven't had one since the days of Donovan McNabb, and that's about 25 years ago. Uh, you know, there's a generation that really doesn't understand the history and tradition of Syracuse football. There was a time, when Syracuse was consistently sending talent to the NFL. I mean, you just look back to this program's last real heyday under Paul Pasqualoni, and again, that's nearly 20 years ago. And you just think about some of the names that went to the NFL from this program under Paul Pasqualoni. Of course, I just mentioned Donovan McNabb. You had Kevin Johnson at wide receiver, of course, Marvin Harrison, Morlon Greenwood, Dwight Freeney, to Bucky Jones, Donovan Darius, Will Allen, just to name a few. And Syracuse is really no longer getting those kids. It's basically it's few and far between that we see a young man from Syracuse, hear his name called at the NFL draft. And at the end of the day, when you're recruiting high school talent, these young men want to know, about your ability as a head coach to get them to that next level. And if you don't have that on your resume, it's going to make it a tougher sell for you to try to get those young men to come play football for you. And honestly, at the end of the day, some of those kids from the Northeast, they're going out to the Big Ten now because the Big Ten has expanded, their footprint basically nationwide. They're going down south to the SEC as well, and in some cases, they're going to the ACC, but they're playing for other schools, more powerful schools, if you will, within that conference. And I mean, honestly, Syracuse has the football facilities. They got some solid football facilities there, but they're a fish out of the water in the ACC. And honestly, I'm actually working on something that I want to get out soon in regards to my thoughts on like realignment in college football and collegiate athletics, because obviously all of it basically is centered around college football. But nonetheless, sometimes you think you're more than what you are, and this is what Syracuse University has done. This like they have sacrificed their athletics, in my opinion, in the race to go out there and try to get a paycheck, a bigger paycheck from the ACC. I mean, you think about Babers. Babers, on his watch, Syracuse only had one winning season within the ACC. That was their 10-win campaign back in 2018. Excuse me, that year they won six conference games. But, even though Syracuse has really floated around 500 for the majority of his tenure there, they've been a team that they've just loaded up on the non-conference portion of their schedule. And they'll get 3 or 4 wins, and then they'll be lucky to get 1 or 2 wins within the ACC. Teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference, they don't fear making the trip up north to the Carrier Dome. It can be noisy at times, not noisy like it was, in another generation. But nonetheless, there's no fear as far as those teams making the trip up north. They figure, they're going to come up there and take care of their business and get back on the plane and head back south, and that'll be it. So for Syracuse, I don't know where they go from here. You're hearing rumors, about names such as Dan Mullen, former Syracuse head coach Doug Marrone, um, excuse me, Willie Fritz at Tulane. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those where you can get, the names, but you got to find somebody that's going to be able to bring in the talent, and not only just bring in the talent, but also develop that talent and find a way to compete in the ACC. It's easier said than done. And this is a problem that has plagued Syracuse football for quite some time. And honestly, as much as I want to, get on them about, their struggles in the ACC, they were up and down in probably like their last 4 or 5 years in the Big East as well. So at the end of the day, Syracuse football has really just fallen on hard times. And you think about it, because Syracuse football has a long litany and rich tradition, especially from like talented players. You think about some of the great names over the years that have played football at Syracuse that are now in the Hall of Fame. The late great Jim Brown, Larry Zonka, Art Monk. I mentioned Marvin Harrison. You talk about Kevin Johnson. I talked about Donovan McNabb, Keith Bullock. Another great player out of the Syracuse program, Marvin Graves, and we could just go right down the list. But these young men nowadays, they don't know about that. And you have to find a way. Whoever comes in to lead this football program, they've got to try to find a way to get back to that tradition. Easier said than done. Like I said, Syracuse being in the ACC, in my opinion, is not helping their football program, but they're going to continue to do it because of the money at the end of the day. So, I mean, you could see the writing on the wall as far as Babers and his time at Syracuse. Honestly, I thought it was inevitable after, another strong start this season, and then the slide just started throughout conference play. They lost their first five in conference play, and I think the bottom fell out when they lost at home to Boston College last month. They were able to save face last week, pardon me, earlier this month when they lost to BC. When they lost to BC, they were able to save face about 10 days ago when they beat Pitt at Yankee Stadium, a bad Pitt team. But then last night, getting dominated by Georgia Tech, a Georgia Tech team that is, now bowl eligible for the first time in several years. And if you looked at that game at times, Syracuse really didn't compete. And that's not the first time that you could say that. They got blown out by Florida State earlier this year, blown out by North Carolina, and blown out by Virginia Tech. And in some of those games, it looked like they really didn't compete. And that's the big thing, I think, which really was the beginning of the end for Dino Babers. Last night, I think, was the cherry on the top, because you figure the powers that be at Syracuse didn't even let Babers finish out the season. And you figure with last night's loss to Georgia Tech, obviously that ended any chances of them being bowl eligible, even if they beat Wake Forest at home on senior day. But nonetheless, The writing was on the wall for Dino, excuse me, for Dino Babers and his tenure there. I don't know what Syracuse football is going to do next, but again, they're a fish out of water in the ACC. They're just simply lost in the in the shuffle there. And good luck to the next person that's going to try to come in and right this ship and lead this program. Again, it was a long time ago when Syracuse football was relevant. And I don't know if we're going to see those days in central New York anytime soon. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.